Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, to Biking Routes to Texas. We're a small bike shop out of Houston, Texas area. So welcome to the channel. So here at Biking Routes, we sell and talk about beginner bikes and also some high-end bikes. Lately, I know we've talked about some higher-end bikes. But when we started Biking Routes back in 2019, 5 years already, we wanted to target beginners and families getting started on mountain bikes. So today, videos towards some beginners. All right, so let's talk about mountain bikes, guys. So I don't know how you got into mountain biking or how you're being introduced to it, but you're in the right place. It's an awesome sport. I've been mountain biking for almost 30 years now, actually probably more than that. I'm getting old. I love it. It's been awesome in my life, being able to get out there in nature on my bike, be able to clear my head, helps my mental health, helps my physical health, get out there with family and with friends, my kids, my wife. And also just seeing other people out there has just been awesome. So I'm glad that you're here, and I hope that you continue and you end up going through and getting your mountain bike and get your journey started, because it's awesome. It's a great community, great place to be. So I'm glad you're here. I know it can be a little overwhelming, which is why I'm making these videos to try to help. So we're going to talk about a few different things, and actually going to take you in a journey. This is going to be a multi-video series that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to go along as well as buying a bike. I'm going to buy a new bike as a beginner and stay in that mindset of what a beginner would be, kind of experiencing as you find a mountain bike, how to transport it, how to store it, how to take care of it, what upgrades to do. So I'm going to help you with that. So stay along for the ride. All right, so part one, I just want to clarify what kind of price point we're talking about here. So I'm going to stay in kind of the $500 to $800 price point, because that's where you're probably going to find a lot of beginners looking. Yes, there's going to be some that have a bigger budget than that. That's totally fine, and that opens up more possibilities as far as what type of mountain bike you can get. And I've had beginners go right to full suspension, which is usually around the $1,500 range. For this purpose of this video, I'm going to talk about kind of that $500 to $800 range. So yes, that does weed out, because I have customers that say, okay, I want to get started. I'm going to go to Academy or Walmart. Nothing against Academy or Walmart, but there's certain bikes that are sold there that are built to a price point. I have those customers come in here with broken wheels. That's a real common, and that's expensive. Yeah, they're built to a price point. Usually they make kind of one size or maybe two sizes that fit some people, and then they use just really inexpensive components that just don't last. And so I would caution you, if you're going to actually go do mountain biking, to go a different route. Walmart does have like their Ozark Trail line that they came out with a couple years ago. Looks very promising, but with the prices these days from some of the bigger brands, I think you could probably get a better deal with better components at a little bit higher price point. So keep that in mind. Oh yeah, and talking about price point, that $500, $800 range, that's for a new bike. Now I know some of you may be like, well, I'm gonna go get a used bike. You can, but as a beginner, I would caution you probably not to, for a variety of reasons. And I actually made a video that talks about why most people should not buy a used bike. So not to say you can't find a great deal sometimes, but you're also new and you don't necessarily know what you're looking for. So watch that other video if you have time, and then hopefully you will then go buy a new bike. And that's not so you go buy a new bike from me. I'm just telling you that a lot of times it can help you in your journey to get started on a new bike. Number two, just clarify, I'm talking about mountain bikes. Sometimes beginners will say, well, I want maybe a hybrid or maybe a gravel bike. I feel like a mountain bike can do more things better than those bikes. So I'm biased towards it, but I think a mountain bike is great for a beginner. Because sometimes some people say, well, I want to maybe do some riding on the trails, so I'm going to get a hybrid. I would say a mountain bike is the better route to go. So anyway, if you do want to do mountain biking, a mountain bike is what you're going to want. All right, so you want a mountain bike. So now there's lots of different terminology that you may not understand. So I'm going to go through it just so we are clear what we're talking about. So when we hear the word hardtail is going to be a bike that has no suspension in the back, just in the front. So that's called a hardtail. Full suspension is going to be a bike that has suspension in the front and also in the back. You do have some rigids as well, which I usually don't recommend for beginners, but where they have no suspension, so they're considered a rigid frame. All right, so then within those categories, you also have different terminology, and a lot of it has to do with the geometry design and how much suspension travel. So suspension travel being how far the suspension moves up and down will determine kind of what the bike is built for. So as far as the least amount of travel, those are going to be called cross-country bikes. and those can be beginners or really high-end bikes. Most beginners tend to get a cross-country bike because most bikes in the kind of $500 to $800 price point are going to be considered cross-country bikes or trail bikes. Cross-country bikes generally have around 100 to 120 millimeters of suspension travel. Trail bikes generally are going to be about 120 to 140 millimeters of travel or so, and there are some overlaps there. And then there's another category now called downcountry bike, which is like 120 to 130, 140. Trail bikes are very popular now because they can do lots of different things. So they're kind of like that middle ground as far as travel goes. Enduro bikes, those are going to have more travel, so usually around 150 to maybe up to 180 millimeters of travel. And then you have your big downhill bikes that are like 180 to like 210 millimeters of travel that you see where they have the World Cup, where they have the races that are, when they're flying down the mountain on big travel bikes. Then you kind of have like your down country is kind of a newer kind of category. All mountains, one that comes up, which kind of fits in like a beefier trail bike that's not quite enduro. So I don't know. Every brand kind of has their own kind of names for some of these bikes, but you also have like your dirt jump bikes, which they use for like slope style or for pump tracks, dedicated jump bikes. And then you have your fat bikes. And there's some other ones, but to try to narrow down, those are probably the most popular ones. So what style of bike should you get? Well, if you're a beginner, the price point, $500, $800, is going to put you most likely in the cross-country or trail bike category. And that's totally fine because a lot of time you're still working on your skills, so you don't need to go send it off huge jumps. Obviously, some of you will. Yeah, some people are going to go out there right away and start sending it off stuff, but most people are going to, they're going to keep it chill. They're not going to, get hurt right away on this new sport that they just, came into. So I would say cross-country is a good starting point. All right, next thing is bike brand. What bike brand do I get? There are so many bike brands. A few weeks back, I went through my list, and I've been working on this list for years. I'm going to post it on bikingroutes.com on our site, just if you're curious about how many bike brands there are. Yeah, there are a lot. Like if you think about it, I think I counted, and these are just reputable brands that like I've heard of, and I verified that they make a good bike, about 100 brands. And that doesn't include like a lot of these new brands that just make e-bikes that you've never heard of, that you have questionable kind of quality, and like, what is this bike that you see and selling all over the place now? But that doesn't include any of those. So just 100 of like reputable mountain bike brands, which is crazy to me. That the car industry, I've counted up car industries around like 50 brands, which probably too many in my opinion, but hey, if they can survive and sell bikes to people, hey, they have the right to do so, of course. But it does make it difficult as a consumer which bike brand and which ones to stand out. The good thing is that most bike brands, and I would say most reputable bike brands that you can buy at a normal bike shop, or that they have some presence in the mountain biking market, they're making really good bikes these days. Everyone makes, I can't think of a brand where I'm just like, yeah, stay away from that brand. Yeah, most people right now, just to stay competitive, because there's so many brands, and they have to make a pretty good product these days. And so that's the good thing, is that most brands are pretty good these days, and I wouldn't necessarily steer you towards one or the other. Obviously, we sell Marin, Norco. Those are kind of our beginner mountain biking brands. So on branding, just make sure they've been around for a little while. Not to say that maybe a startup isn't good. May have less of a track record, so they could be good. They could have issues. They could be gone in a year. Nice to try to find a brand that maybe has been doing it for a little while. Okay, so now that you've kind of decided on a brand, how important is sizing? I would argue sizing is more important than brand, and sometimes even components, because over the years I've seen people that they get excited about a bike, maybe they found one on sale or from a buddy, and it just doesn't fit them. Too big, too small, and they just never get comfortable on it. You don't want your introduction to mountain biking not be as good because you're on a bike that just doesn't fit you. Obviously, sometimes you may not have a choice, but other times people will kind of talk themselves into a certain size thinking that's fine, but they don't necessarily know what fine is. And so look at the charts on the websites. That's a good guide as far as what height you are and where you fit in. Try to find a bike that's in your size. If you're in between sizes, which is also common, I usually recommend to people to size down because it just makes it a little bit easier if you want to try to get to the right size. Like say you're a little bit too small, you could get a stem that's a little bit longer. If you ever want to do a dropper post, gives you more options there as far as height. as opposed to getting a bike that's too big. You can't shrink it down because it already has a small stem, and then suddenly you like don't even have any room to do a dropper post if you wanted one, and the top tube's too high. Anyway, so if you can, go find a local bike shop where you can go into that sells lots of different brands if you can, and try sitting on some of them. If you can ride them in the parking lot, that's awesome. Just so you can get a feel for which bikes they have, what models, and then just see how it fits, because that's very important as far as making sure you feel comfortable on the mountain bike. Now, you also may be thinking, I haven't been on a bike in 15, 20 years or longer. We've had customers like that before. So yeah, you may not necessarily know what you're looking for, but hopefully a good salesperson there will kind of tell you, okay, that looks good, or how does this feel, and make sure the seat's the right height, and be able to kind of look at you on the bike and say, okay, that fits you, or I think you should get a little bit bigger size or a little bit smaller size. And I realize that some of you may not have a local bike shop, so that's difficult. So that's why I would say, hey, go to their website, see what you can find out on their sizing charts, and then make a decision that way. If you're gonna have to buy something, sight unseen, and then hope you get the right size. Every bike brand's a little different. So some of them can fit on the small size, some can be on the larger size. So ask around, ask the company, and then make the best decision that you can. All right, so we can't talk about sizing without talking about wheel size. So if you're just getting into mountain bikes, you're going to be kind of overwhelmed a little bit, and you may be looking for the 26-inch wheels. And just tell you up front, they're not out there on the new bikes unless it's like a dirt jump or a youth bike. So for adult bikes, 29 or 27.5 is what you're going to find out there on the market now. So that can be a big shock and change to some of you that may have not been on a mountain bike for a while, or you have a really old clunker from a while back. So yeah, so now bike wheels are bigger, and so you may be thinking, well, 29 or 27.5. I would say, for the most part, if you're a tall person, 29 is going to be where you should go. If you're on the shorter side, 27.5 is going to fit better, but there are exceptions, and there are some brands that will offer both. If you're like a medium, like Marin, for example, on the Bobcat, they offer a 29 or a 27.5, and then it just kind of goes to preference. In general, there's lots of different arguments on it, but in general, 29er is going to roll over stuff a little bit easier, a little bit faster, but it's also going to be a little bit slower in the turn-ins and not feel quite as snappy as like a 27.5. One's not better than the other, they're just different in how they feel and the type of riding maybe you're looking for. If you're a beginner, you may not know, so I would say if you can, ride both. If not, if you're shorter, 27.5 might feel a little bit easier to get on and off and turn. If you're a tall person, 29 is probably going to give you more space and you'll feel more comfortable on the bike. All right, let's talk about bike specs. So this can be a little overwhelming because you're all this new terminology, and then you see these bike specs and you're like, what's a bottom bracket? What is a crankset? What's a derailleur? What's a clutch? What is a hydraulic disc brake? Don't worry, it's okay. A good bike shop is not going to look at you like you're a fool. They're going to educate you. Yeah, when you're first getting into something, things are going to be a little bit foreign to you. So specs can be a little bit overwhelming. All right, so my guidance on specs and when looking at a bike, I would say if you can get a 1x drivetrain, and you're like, what's a 1x drivetrain? That's where you don't have a derailleur up front. You just have a single gear, and then you have the bigger gears in the back. Most of the time, those are paired with a clutch derailleur, which a clutch derailleur is a mechanism that makes it stiff so that the chain doesn't come flying off, keeps it nice and quiet out on the trails. If you can, in your price point, get one of those. You're going to be way ahead as far as just performance out on the trail and have a better experience with the mountain bike. Now, if you found one that's a good deal and it has a derailleur up front, it's not the end of the world. It's just going to be a little bit noisier, and it's just not quite as nice as the newest stuff. But obviously, you can still have a good time on it. You're just going to have to think about a little bit more because you're going to have to know what gear to be in up front. I would say as far as brakes, if you can get hydraulic brakes, that would be a must. A lot of mechanical, now they used to, and some companies still do, make a good mechanical disc brake. The ones that I see on a lot of inexpensive bikes are not that good, and they have a lot of issues trying to get them to really bite. So I would say if you can get a hydraulic brake, if you have like a Tektro, Shimano, those are a good brake on beginner bikes. As far as drivetrains, Microshift, Shimano, SRAM, those are good reputable ones. Other ones, I don't know. Those are ones that I've seen. Other brands, yeah, maybe, but I would be a little bit skeptical. So yeah, just to recap, I would say don't get too caught up in the specs. Make sure you get your best bang for your buck from whatever brand. It may come down to color. You may look at one and be like, I like that color, I hate that color. And so you pick your bike that way, and that's totally fine. All right, guys, so I know that was a lot of talking, but hopefully you got something out of the video. If I left something out that you think is important for a beginner, let me know in the comments. Want to help everyone out when they're choosing their first mountain bike. And speaking of first mountain bike, which mountain bike am I going to choose? Well, I haven't revealed it yet. Next video, I'm going to talk about which bike I chose and why, but I'm excited about it. I actually generally am. I'm putting myself in that mindset of, being my first mountain bike. If you found this useful, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from Biking Roots and our other videos. Hope you guys are doing well. We'll see you guys on the next video. Take care. Bye.